Thank you all for joining us tonight for Family Orientation. We are very excited to welcome you to the CCS community and go over a bunch of resources for you today and answer questions as you have them along the way. For an introduction, my name is Dan Long. I am the Assistant Vice President for Campus Life and the Dean of Students at the College for Creative Studies. And I'll be doing most of the talking tonight, but I'm also joined by Ryan Harrison, who I'll let introduce himself.
Thanks. My name is Ryan Harrison. I am the Assistant Dean of Students, which primarily means I oversee housing on campus as well as dining services. I'll be answering a lot of your questions in the Q&A today.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. So to try and answer as many questions as we can, you should have access in your Zoom browser to use the Q&A function. That's what we're going to try and use in terms of answering questions today in this webinar format. So go ahead and put any questions that come up in that Q&A section. Ryan's going to be primarily monitoring that all night, and he'll be answering those questions as we move along. And if there is a large number of them that are similar, he'll bring that back to this group. We'll answer them here live. Or if there's ones that are complicated or we just kind of need to talk through a little bit more, we will do that as well. I would encourage you to keep your questions in that Q&A relatively general. We do not have the capacity tonight to answer like individual family-specific questions, but all of our contact information is contained within this presentation. And so if there is something that comes up that is very, unique to your student, we'd love to help you out. We'll just ask you to get in touch with us after this webinar is over, basically. So with that all being said, I can't move the presentation forward. So let's do this again. Every time I touch something, it decides I can't move the presentation. So this is what we're going to cover today. Our goal is always to keep this to an hour or less. We know that it's Sunday night. Everyone's, getting ready for the weekday or work week tomorrow. So we try and keep this to an hour. We are going to go over the academic transition and support, the kind of academic transition that your student will expect starting at CCS. Some of this will be familiar for those that have sent a child or a grandchild off to college before. Others of it is going to be specific to kind of the experience at CCS and how that might be different than some other institutions. We're going to go over some basic ideas and how you can help your student navigate some of these transitions and challenges that they're going to face over this first year at CCS. And then we're going to close with a brief overview of resources that you as family members supporting a CCS student might want to know about. These will be great resources that you can ask your student, have they explored this option? Have they gone and visited this office? That kind of thing. A good way to direct them to helping themselves on campus. And as I said, we will be answering questions along the way. So Ryan's going to be answering those live in the Q&A, but then also he'll pause me along the way if there's something that comes up that we should address in the moment in the presentation. So with that being said, we will jump into the academic transition. So most students here on a full-time class load will be in classes roughly 27 hours per week. We typically essentially advise students to prepare to double that work time to deal with the homework load that they're going to get. So a typical student at CCS is going to be working academically somewhere between 45 to 50 hours, 55 hours a week. That is not necessarily, it doesn't sound like a huge amount of work. That's what most of us work as a full-time job, is that 40 to 50 hours a week time frame. But this is going to feel different to your student. It's not the same structure as the high school environment. So they're going to have to be managing their own time. The biggest challenge that students run into is that an instructor will plan for an assignment to take a certain amount of time. They'll plan for this particular assignment to take an hour. Where students tend to struggle is that hour that faculty member is calculating is what gets us to that roughly 40 to 45, 50 hours a week of work. If students are struggling to complete those assignments in that same amount of time, that's where some of the resources we're going to talk about are going to come up later. Students are either struggling to understand the material, understand how to execute the assignment that they're working through, or they're getting stuck in kind of artist designer paralysis, where they're just going down a rabbit hole of constantly making micro adjustments. It's not good enough yet. I can't turn it in yet. And they'll lose hours at a time into that spiral. So they are going to likely experience feelings of being overwhelmed at times during the first semester at CCS. And this is one of those areas where, as the family support network for students, you can help chip away at some of that feelings of overwhelmed with questions about how they're managing their time, what they're doing for support, who they're asking for questions, those kind of support systems. As I mentioned briefly earlier, the structure is gone. The typical high school, roughly 8 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. with a structured maybe organization, activity, athletics. Immediately after that, that daily structure is going to be gone. Every day of the week is going to look different for them. Their courses could be scheduled anytime between an 8:30 a.m. start and a 7 p.m. start. So they may be taking classes at a time period that they have never taken a class before. They also might have their first class of the day at, say, 4 o'clock p.m. And so learning what to do with that time before that 4 p.m. class is going to be a critical skill for their time at CCS. But that's a helpful reminder for all of us as we go through this, is that transition from high school to CCS or to any college, removing all that structure means the student has to build it back in. That goes along with this whole idea that there are not necessarily reminders. Course syllabus are handed out. Those have assignment deadlines. Faculty members may be talking about deadlines during their classes. But there's not necessarily going to be a system of reminders making sure that students are keeping on track throughout the entirety of the semester. And the biggest thing that I like to highlight for new students is that there is ample help at CCS for them to navigate these different challenges that they're going to experience, but they are going to need to ask for it. A lot of students that I meet with, basically, I say at a certain point with them, it doesn't matter who you ask for help, just ask someone. Because if you're not asking the exact correct person for the help that you need at that moment, the person you're going to ask for help is going to know where to direct you, how to connect you with the right person, and making sure that you get the assistance that you need as a student here at CCS. The biggest thing is just asking for that help, asking for that support from someone at CCS. So that's a lot of the standard sort of you're going from high school to college transitions that students would face going to any college or university. This slide is a little bit more about the transition to specifically CCS. As an art and design school, things are a little bit different here. They are structured in a different way at times. And there's going to be some identity issues that arise out of that difference that being at CCS specifically is going to cause. The one I want to highlight at the start is many students come to CCS and they struggle with, are they still the art star? Many of our students were the art kid at their high school. Anytime something came up that required an artistic flair or someone to draw something or someone to design something, they were always the student that was tapped and asked to do that. They were the big fish. At CCS, we bring in nothing but big fish. So now the students have to compare themselves against other students of comparable ability and talent and dedication. And for some of our students, that does create a point of struggle for them, is that they've lost a certain sense of their identity. And they may be worried about competition. Do they feel that they are not performing at the same level as some of their other peers? One of the things that I routinely remind first year students of, particularly ones that are struggling with their own self confidence with their art and design, is one of the biggest challenges that your student will face at CCS is when they walk the halls of the campus, artwork is hung everywhere. And it's critical that students remember that that is work that was often purchased from seniors who had just graduated from CCS. It's from juniors and seniors in sponsored studios. It is that work is being displayed from students who have learned an incredible amount during the time that they've already been at CCS, and comparing first year work and skill sets to those upper class and new alumni works and skill sets is where a lot of our students do start to struggle some with their own self-confidence. We also do have a lot more long-term projects than many students have experienced during their high school time period. During the first semester that a student is at CCS, this is less of a point of concern, but our entire curriculum is laid out and built in a way to teach them the skills to manage these long-term projects. And the way I like to characterize it is in your first semester, you'll likely be doing a series of smaller standalone projects, learning specific skill sets, learning pieces of software, these kind of narrower bucket assignments. As you move through the curriculum and move up into those junior and senior level classes, you may truly only be working on one project for the duration of the semester. Our curriculum is built to teach the students the skills that they need to be able to execute a semester-long project independently. So understanding what project planning is, how to manage your time to meet those intermediate deadlines that you have to set for yourself that are not necessarily set by the instructor. So they're going to be learning these skill sets of what a long-term project plan is and how to build one, but it is a daunting task that many of our students struggle with. This is not necessarily a skill set that all students are coming to a college environment with. And I would almost say most 18, 19-year-old students are not coming to a university or a college environment with the skill set of how you take a project that's due in 3 to 6 months and break it down into the smaller steps that you are holding yourself accountable for. So we're going to coach them through that process. We're going to teach them the skills that they need to manage those long-term projects. But this is one of the things that, as a family support system, you might want to keep in the back of your mind that this might be a topic that they're struggling with. And the last thing that I'll talk about here is just, and this is kind of in between traditional college and university environment and what they might find at CCS, but the new competing set of priorities that they will find themselves in at CCS, and competing priorities between family, friends, academics, career preparation, all of these various life buckets. Many of our students haven't had to process through that competition for their time and attention. And it is often a newly elevated sense of competing priorities with academics, because as they move into the curriculum that they're here for at CCS for, specializing in, highly passionate in, they're also going to want to be spending more time on their academics than they may have wanted to in the past. I know many of our students will struggle with things like essay writing, or they hated their math classes. So there wasn't a pull towards the academic side of their priorities. Now that they're at CCS and pursuing what is likely a passion area for them, that drive and that pull towards their academic commitments is going to increase. And that bandwidth has to come from somewhere. So some of the quick ways that we like to walk through in this presentation of how you can help through some of these transitions and challenges, um, and what you can offer as a family support system. One of the things we really like to highlight is how they are doing outside of school is still very important. This is the area where oftentimes when we go through a significant life change or we're going through a transition, all of our attention gets paid to that new um, item that we're working through. And so the tendency is to focus exclusively on how is school going, how are your classes, what are you learning, all of those sort of questions. But there's still a whole person. And we like to remind ourselves, our students, and everyone else that's connected to them that the students are whole people while they are here at CCS. So they're going to have issues with isolation potentially. And they may have stressors in their life like a work problem. They may have friendship relationships, romantic relationships that are also part of their life and incredibly important to them. And failing to identify and recognize all of those stressors that may be impacting your student's life is what we don't want to lose sight of. It's also critical that we remember as we send 18, 19-year-olds off to college that we are transitioning to them with a life as an adult. And it's critical to remember that oftentimes a student in that transition period may need support and may actively want support and be looking for it. And it may not be from their direct family anymore at that particular time. We're always going to be a support system for our family members, our children, but there are different topics that they're going to be addressing, dealing, and encountering with as they move into that adult phase of their life, and they may not be looking for support from the same places that they always have. I like to highlight that we like to ask open-ended questions of our students during this time period. We tend to focus too much on like, how are your grades? How was that assignment? We want to move to these more open-ended questions to get them excited about. So asking them things like, what are you excited about right now? It's going to lead to a better conversation than simply, what did you learn in class today? Asking them questions like, how are you getting help with that? We're trying to build that autonomy and that resilience that students need as adults once they move to graduation and are alumni. We want them to be able to problem solve independently. So knowing the resources that you have available to you is helpful as you process with them how they are getting help with that. If they can't come up with necessarily the right office, you have those reminders in the back of your head. And as we're working towards autonomy with our young adults moving into adulthood, is we're trying to encourage taking risks and learning from the mistakes. This is another feature area of our curriculum at CCS where students are encouraged to take risks with their art and design work. They're encouraged to push boundaries and they're encouraged to fail at different times. And that doesn't inherently mean failing a course. It means pursuing an idea that may not work and understanding that it is okay to pursue an idea that might not work because you're going to take learning from it and it's going to make you a better artist and designer over time. And CCS is what amounts to a low consequences environment for that risk taking and learning from those mistakes. If a student is pursuing an idea for an assignment and it is not going to work, but they want to see what happens, they have the freedom within our curriculum and will be supported by our faculty to take those risks and learn from mistakes and learn from what happened in a failure potentially in that risk that they're taking. And they're going to grow as an artist and designer. They're going to become a stronger, more artist and designer through that process. And our faculty are actively going to encourage them to do that because this is a low consequences environment. They're not going to be fired. They're not going to lose, hundreds of thousands of dollars on a contract that goes bad. They're going to learn from that mistake in our classroom environment. And all of this comes together to just build the resiliency of our students, learning that they can overcome challenges, learning that they can take risks, fail, and learn from it, and build something better out of it is the ultimate goal of everything that is being taught in our classes here at CCS is building that resilience as a professional working artist and designer. It's going to be a critical skill for them as an alumni working in a creative field. That sense of resiliency and being able to bounce back from a mistake or a misstep is incredibly critical to them. So as I mentioned earlier, we don't want to just focus on grades. We want to focus on learning and development. Um, Ask what they're learning in their classes or what they're excited to be learning in their classes. Ask about those mistakes. Like, did you try something that didn't work out? Like, what happened? Have those kind of conversations, not just about grades. And I strongly encourage you as a family, if you have not already done so, have a conversation before the semester starts about what you expect to be told, what boundaries you're going to set between the two of, the two sides to that party, student and family. Have those conversations now while there's not any stress involved with it. And have that conversation holistically about, like, I want to know what you're learning about. I want to know what your grades look like. I don't want to know what your grades look like. I just want to know if you're passing or failing. Have all those conversations now so that you can start the semester having a mutual understanding of what those conversations are going to look like throughout their time at CCS. And again, I'd like to bring this back towards the end of this section here. A reminder to ask open-ended questions. I think we've all done it with our children before, where we've asked a yes or no question, thinking that they might elaborate independently, and we get a simple yes or no answer, and we're then trying to tease out how to get more information there. So asking those open-ended questions is going to elicit a better dialogue. Couple that I particularly really like is, what was a good question today? And it doesn't have to even be their question. You know, they didn't need to necessarily ask a question, but what was a good question that was asked in a class that really spurred some interesting dialogue, or they felt that really highlight something critical or important to them, or clarified something for them. And the other one I really like is, what did you learn that got you excited today? There are all of these unique nuances and subcultures of art and design, and finding out where a student's excitement lives is really cool to watch that unfold. I've had students have conversations with me at CCS where they were just fired up about font and typeset. They just, in that moment at that time, they were incredibly excited about that topic. And it's not something I ever would have started a conversation with, because it just wouldn't have occurred to me. But asking a question about, what were you excited to learn today, brings out those things where they start talking about, oh, we learned all about kerning and it was awesome and it was blah, blah, blah. And you'll be like, it's just overwhelming at times how much comes out when you get at that excitement of what they're learning in our curriculum. So how can you do all of that? So we have a host of resources at CCS that helps navigate all of these challenges, all of these support structures, and helps to reinforce all of these concepts. So this next phase of the presentation, we're going to run through just some resources that we feel like families should know about. And again, these are great things to offer to your student if you notice that they're struggling with a topic in this kind of area. So the first one we'll jump to is the Center for Tutoring and Writing. And there are two co-directors, and they're both academic coaches as well. Catherine and Holly, they've both been at CCS for quite a while now. And what the Center for Tutoring and Writing does is it offers tutoring, for all of our students in just about every class that we have at CCS. There's a few niche programs where we struggle to find an appropriate tutor. to staff in that area. But if your student's struggling with one of those kind of classes, I would still strongly encourage them to go and see Catherine or Holly. They'll find a resource for that student. They don't just tell a student, we don't have that, and sorry. They will say, oh, we don't have a tutor specializing in that, but let me get the department chair on the phone. We'll find a way to get you through this. So they offer tutoring services. They are absolutely no additional cost. There's no limits on them. Open to all students. Every day of the week. And we offer Zoom appointments and in-person appointments through the Center for Tutoring and Writing. The other thing that they do is offer writing support. This is actually one of their biggest services that they offer. Students at CCS are able to bring a writing assignment at any stage of that writing assignment into the CTW for support from primarily Catherine or Holly, the co-directors there. They will be able to help students with everything from the outlining phase through the final proofreading phase. So if your student is struggling at all with a writing assignment, I strongly urge you to point them towards the CTW and Catherine and Holly to get some of that support there. And then the last thing that Catherine and Holly do specifically is academic coaching. And they will sit down with a student who's struggling with any sort of the academic functions side of being a successful student. So if they're struggling with project planning, time management, organization as a whole, anything in that arena, they'll be able to sit down with that student and help them build some tools and some techniques to solve those kind of academic executive functions, basically. And they will meet with a student even weekly if the student wants to set aside a half an hour a week to meet with one of the two of them. And again, they can do those both in person or over a Zoom appointment. So either would be fine. We also have a wellness and counseling center on campus. The Wellness and Counseling Center offers solution-focused counseling support for all students at CCS. We have 3 full-time clinicians that work in the Wellness Center, and then 1 health resource manager as well. So students are able to schedule 45-minute sessions. Currently, there is a limit of 8 sessions per semester, which works out to roughly every other week is what students have a limit to, purely based on capacity of those 3 clinicians in the wellness office. And then our health resources manager offers a lot of health education on campus. She oversees some peer wellness educators who do student programming that's rooted in principles of wellness. So they'll offer yoga workshops or nutrition workshops, kind of the holistic side of health and wellness. She also manages our student health insurance programs. So if your student does need some sort of health insurance, we have someone that will be able to help walk her through that as well. So this is our clinical counseling services here. I'm not going to go through and read this all to you. But again, they are 3 master's level state of Michigan licensed clinical therapists, and basically specializing in the challenges that college students often face, emotional concerns, behavioral concerns, and then student-specific concerns. That's going to be your things like your adjustment, homesickness, that feeling of being overwhelmed or worrying about your academic performance. So those are all topics that are, of course, appropriate to bring to that counseling office. They do offer additional weekly walk-in hours. Your student will see these advertised on campus once the semester actually gets started. They wait until the first week of classes to determine exactly when those weekly walk-in hours are going to be. They're typically during a lunch time period, though, which at CCS is approximately 11:30 to 12:30. And then the other service that I'll highlight is our UWIL 24/7 crisis and counseling support. UWIL is a telemedicine-based counseling service. They offer two types of counseling services. One is an ongoing therapeutic relationship with a counselor. It's just with a you will counselor, and it's all via Zoom. That if your student wasn't interested in meeting with one of our on-site counselors, they would have access to a counselor through you will. They also do 24/7 crisis-based counseling. So if a student is struggling, excuse me, with thoughts of self-harm, thoughts of suicide, those kind of immediate crisis level concerns, UWill does offer 24/7 crisis support for students in that capacity. UWill also is how we take care of our medical and health related services at this point. So UWill does offer a full telemedicine option for students to use. Again, it is included in the cost of tuition, so there's no additional fees for any of these UWill services. But if a student just has something like an ear infection, they would be able to contact the UWill telemedicine branch of that service and schedule an appointment with either a nurse practitioner or a doctor to get some basic medical care. Many people who have Blue Cross Blue Shield or Blue Care Network, those kind of insurances, have started to see some of this telemedicine working in their personal lives as well. So it's very similar to that structure. And if a student does need additional follow-up care that can't be addressed through a telemedicine appointment, UWell does have a way to make an appropriate referral to a in-person doctor near your student. I think the last couple things that the Wellness Services Office offers that I haven't covered yet is we do offer student health insurance. This is through Wellfleet currently. So if your student does not currently have health insurance, we do offer a plan on campus that they can purchase. It is a pretty reasonably priced health insurance option because we have a consortium agreement with a number of other small colleges to get that cost of that health insurance down pretty low. I believe last year it was approximately $300 per semester. But if that is something that you're specifically interested in for your student, we can get you connected with Emily, who is that health outreach manager who manages our student health insurance program. We also all students are automatically enrolled in a supplemental accident insurance policy on campus. This is a secondary insurance. So if you do have health insurance, the supplemental accident insurance would help cover things like copays, you know, bills related to an accident that are not covered by your personal insurance. We instituted this quite a number of years ago. CCS is at times a dangerous place. We have hot things, we have chemicals, we have power tools, and every now and again an accident happens, and we want to just make sure that students have as much coverage as they possibly can for that. The really nice thing about it is that it doesn't just cover accidents on CCS property. Anything in their life that would be considered an accident, they could submit a claim through this supplemental accident insurance. So if they were at home and had a car accident and had some medical bills that their personal health insurance didn't cover, they could submit a claim through the supplemental accident insurance policy, even for something like that. And then the picture that you can see on your screen there with the kind of dangling hammock chairs, that is the health hub where we offer a lot of printed health resources, some personal care products, things of that nature. But we also house our CCS Food and Supplies Bank in that health hub as well. So if your student is struggling at any point with food or affording supplies, there are often things that they can come and just take for free from the health hub, which is located in the first floor of the Yamasaki building. So again, just resources that you can be aware of. And then I personally handle our disability services intakes on campus. So any students with disabilities are, of course, eligible to receive reasonable accommodations through the Americans with Disabilities Act. and we do make all of those reasonable accommodations. I do encourage students to disclose those disabilities as early as possible, because retroactive accommodations cannot be made for a student with accommodations. So if a student failed an exam because they were eligible but didn't use extra time on the exam in a private testing space, I can't go back in time and have them retake that test with their accommodations. So what I tell students is that if you're even considering accommodations, let's schedule an appointment. Let's sit down and talk about what your concerns are, if accommodations are the best way to address those concerns, or if there are other avenues we can pursue. The sooner that I am notified of an accommodation request, the sooner we can make sure that all of those necessary accommodations are in place for a student. The process is incredibly simple. I'm the only person involved with it. So all I ask is a student to either call or email me to set up a meeting to discuss accommodations. They will have to submit documentation substantiating that disability. And this could be the disability verification form that you can find on our website. It can also be a letter directly from a doctor or a therapist. Or it could be a copy of an existing high school 504 plan if they did have accommodations in high school. After I receive that documentation, we'll schedule a quick meeting. We'll review what the accommodations request for that student is, and then we'll set those in place for the student. Typically, it takes roughly 20 to 30 minutes to have that meeting to finalize everything. And then once we hold that meeting, those accommodations are good for the entire time that a student is at CCS. We don't have to go through a renewal process or anything of that nature. A big resource for your student is going to be the Academic Advising and Registration Office. You can see the director, Tanisha Nunley, here on the screen. The academic advisor is going to be a critical co-pilot to your student's education. These are all of the things that a student could go to their academic advisor and receive help with. I basically like to summarize it and say, like, if your student has a question about their curriculum, their degree plan, or courses in general, their academic advisor is going to be one of the key people that they're going to go to and talk to about those questions. They can also help with a host of other things that we'll get into throughout the next couple of slides. But if they have a question about their curriculum, academic advising is going to be the first stop for them. A lot of the records that academic advising uses, students do have access to on their own. They can see their own curriculum chart through self-service, which they'll learn about more as their time goes on here. They'll learn how to request an academic evaluation. They will learn all about what the student self-service and student planning online is through their first year experience course and some of those appointments that they'll have early on with their academic advisor. So again, the role of the academic advisor is to discuss your educational opportunities and how to execute those opportunities, basically. So if your student has a specific career path in mind, they're going to want to talk to their academic advisor, and they're also going to want to talk their academic department chair. They can build those plans for how they execute their curriculum to support their future career goals. Academic advisors can explain registration, academic policies, all sorts of program procedures. Some of the things that students are going to do in their junior and senior year at CCS, like internships, if they're considering study abroad, those kind of things. Academic advisors are going to be your first stop in planning for those steps in their educational journey, because they know the policies and the steps that a student has to go through to make their ideas come to life. At this point, you should have already heard from your advisor, or your student should have already heard from your advisor at least once this summer. I believe all of our new students are registered. So you should have had at least some point of contact with your academic advisor now. If you have not yet heard from your academic advisor, I'd encourage your student to contact the advising office and see if they can schedule some time, or get their email address so they can send them an email or something of that nature. This is the contact information. I'll just kind of pause here on this screen for a second in case anyone's writing this down. This is the academic advice and registration office contact information. So anything that you want to schedule an appointment, just ask a quick question, anything of that nature, you can use this general contact page here. All right. And then one of the things that Tanisha Nunley, the director of advising, wants me to cover during this presentation is the shift in privacy rights for college students leaving high school into college. Once that student is enrolled at college, they now are the person who holds all of their privacy rights. So this is the transition of the Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act from the high school environment where parents or guardians hold the privacy rights. The college environment, that privacy right transitions to the student. So that means that as a college, we are not permitted to share any information about a student's academic record, which includes course registrations, grades, faculty feedback, judicial student outcomes, basically everything about their life at CCS. We're not permitted to share unless there's a few extenuating circumstances. So one, the student can file a FERPA release. That form is available through the Academic Advising and Registration Office. A student can say, I am willing to let CCS tell these specific people about these specific topics. And they have an option to just say anything and everything in my educational record, or they can limit it more specifically. So if a student signs one of those FERPA releases, then the college is going to be able to discuss that student's academic record with anyone on that named form. Now, if you call and ask a question, even with that FERPA release on file, the person that you contact may not tell you anything anyway. Their default is to protect the student's privacy rights. They may transfer you to a different person on campus to help navigate that process. We train most of our employees to maintain the privacy under all circumstances. That way we're not accidentally violating someone's privacy rights. The other general areas that we could release a student's record is with other CCS school officials that have a specific need to know the information that's being requested. We may be able to show some information to parents who have evidence of a dependent student as defined by the Internal Revenue Code. And we will comply with a lawfully issued subpoena or court order. Or the one that comes up more frequently is if there is a need to share information based on a health or safety emergency related to that specific student or other individuals. So technically, it's a violation of FERPA privacy laws if I call a parent and say your student has been hospitalized because they had really bad pneumonia. But in that situation, we would say the student's health and safety is prioritized over the need to maintain privacy of everything that's happening to them on campus. So we would make that call to make sure that the appropriate emergency contacts are contacted in those situations. I think the critical thing here is this goes along really well with that conversation I suggested earlier about what you expect to know from your student as they come to CCS, talking through privacy rights, and if that student's going to fill out a privacy release form, those conversations should be happening now, so that it doesn't come up at a later date when there's kind of higher stakes involved. And then I'm going to let Ryan stick in the chat here, but we're going to move on to our Residence Life program. Ryan Harrison is, as you said, the Assistant Dean of Students, and one of the offices he does oversee directly is Res Life. We have two residential buildings on campus, the Art Center building, which is more of a traditional apartment built in, or each apartment has kitchens, and the size of those apartments for most students ranges from 4 people to 6 people in an apartment. The Taubman Center is more of a traditional college suite style, where it's a single kind of studio style bedroom, living room area with a bathroom dedicated to that suite. 2 to 3 students will live in those suites. And the Taubman Center features our main dining hall for campus as well, because this Taubman Center does not have any kitchen facilities built into the apartments. We have 2 full-time live-in professional staff members. Ann Hawkins is in the Taubman Center, and Becca Hanna is in the Art Center building. They do the heavy lifting on planning things like move in, move out, supervising our resident assistant staff, being a crisis resource for students, helping students navigate roommate challenges, kind of anything that might come up in that residence hall environment. And then we do have 21 student staff members, resident assistants, who live throughout the buildings. There's usually 1 or 2 per residential floor, depending on the building that they're in. These students are actually in the middle of a pretty intensive 2.5 weeks of training currently. They're trained on a host of topics: emergency response, peer mediation, roommate conflicts, empathy skills, basically anything that might make that transition for a student easier, help them build healthy community on campus. And then they offer a variety of like social programs to help, residents get to know each other throughout the course of each year. And then the other thing that we like to highlight at this point is that each year you do have to reapply for housing if you're choosing to live in housing again next year. It's not a one-time housing application, so every year that's something that's going to have to happen. We say January, sometimes it's more like February when the housing application becomes available. But we say January so that at the start of the year, you're having your student keep an eye out for emails announcing when that housing application is going to become available. The biggest thing to remember is just don't let it slide. So as soon as that housing application becomes available, we encourage students to apply within the 3-week time period after that, so that they can check that off their to-do list for the following year. All right. Financial aid. Financial aid is a complicated one. 98% of our students do receive some type of merit or CCS grants. And there's a lot of information in here, and there's clearly some dates that are now wrong that I didn't catch in revising this presentation for this year. I think the biggest things to remember is that filing that FAFSA application every year is critical to receiving as much financial aid as your student will be eligible to. Again, that's something that needs to happen every single year. And it is critical to making sure that you're receiving as much money from the federal government as possible. So we want to make sure that parents have that on their radar to make sure that their student is not ignoring that. Often you have to fill it out as a family anyway, because if your student is a dependent of you, your tax information goes along with that. We do, I basically just like to say here that we will take money for tuition in any way that you want to pay for it. So you can contact us by phone, mail, you can set up a monthly payment plan, you can pay online. There's a host of options for paying tuition. Some students do receive a financial aid refund, and we strongly encourage students to sign up for direct deposit as that refund is processed much faster through a direct deposit than a mailed or picked up check. So setting up direct deposit is very simple with CCS. Strongly urge you to do that. Refunds will be issued within 3 weeks of the start of the semester, as long as there is no outstanding balance on a student's account. One of the things that I like to point out here is that a refund for financial aid and tuition is going to be issued in your student's name. It's going to be sent to their banking account, or the check is going to be made out to them. We know that many students are not directly paying their tuition. They are receiving help from their family, but their account at CCS is legally in their name, so that refund can only be issued to that student specifically, no matter where that money came from. So again, it's just something to be aware of, and have a conversation up front with your student if you are expecting a refund, what you as a family expect them to do with that refund. This is just a list of reminders of when you should contact financial aid. I think I'll start with, if you have any questions about financial aid, you should call financial aid. There are people on campus that don't work in that office that do know some about the financial aid process, and they might be able to answer some surface level questions for you. But it's always best to go directly to the financial aid office and get the answers directly from them. If they're doing a complete withdrawal, doing an internship, enrolling in or being enrolled in less than half time, which is 6 credits or less, they need to go and talk to financial aid, because there's going to have an implication on what loans, grants, and scholarships that they're eligible for. Any advice on applying for supplemental loans, you can certainly go to financial aid for questions there. And if you're just simply worried about being able to pay the balance of your account, talking to financial aid early and often is always the best answer. And again, I'll pause here just for a second so that if anyone wants to write down the direct contact info for financial aid, it's on this page. Financial aid and academic advising are all located in the Yamasaki building as well. Almost every student services office that your student might encounter are located in the Yamasaki building. And then our campus safety and security office. We have 2 directors in our campus safety office. Dina Rainiak is the director of campus safety at the Taubman Center, and Amanda Gillette is the director of campus safety at the Ford campus. We have our campus safety officers are subcontracted through Allied Security. Our on-site account manager is Azar Rahman. He works for Allied Security, but he works at CCS's location, overseeing the entire operation. We have 2 site supervisors from Allied, 9 shift supervisors, and roughly 40 to 50 security officers on campus at any point, given differences between the time of the year and different needs that are going on through campus at that point. We have a crisis management team on campus who would be managing a large scale crisis. So if we had a building fire, if we had a natural disaster, a tornado on campus, or something of that nature, if we had some sort of act of violence on campus, that is all going to be managed through our emergency response planning by our crisis management team. That team does a number of tabletop and functional exercises each year. We have an emergency response plan and a crisis management plan to navigate some of those larger scale incidences that might occur. Each building on campus also has at least 1, if not 2, designated emergency response coordinators trained per floor of the building. So in the Taubman Center, it's 11 stories tall. We have almost 22 of those emergency response coordinators. So in the event of a fire alarm, or a natural disaster like a tornado warning, tornado watch. Those emergency response coordinators are trained to know what to do in a given situation. We do have an emergency alert notification system for our campus. You are welcome to sign up to receive those alerts as well. You would just need to type CCS parent to the number 888777. Just send that text and it will enroll you in our emergency notification system. You do have to do that annually. We do purge those subscriptions every year, so you would have to renew that annually. We do not send out very many emergency notifications, luckily. But if there are things like campus closures due to snow days, other inclement weathers, building emergencies, that is one of the ways that we are notifying our community that we are closed. There will also be an email that goes out, but the text message is generally going to be the fastest response that we get there. And then just a quick overview of our campus security technology on campus. We have, I think we're actually over 330 closed circuit cameras located throughout the two campuses at CCS. Those cameras are monitored by shift supervisors 24/7. And we do have the ability to share our closed circuit cameras with the Wayne State University Police Command Center. This would be critical if they're helping to respond to something like an incident of violence or something of that nature. Wayne State would be able to pull up our video feeds and see what they're responding to. Most of our building is access control, or most of our campus is access controlled. So you will see access control readers on every building's exterior doors, many of the interior doors as well. Students will have access, so they'll have to carry their ID with them at all times. You'll see these. A great example is to get into the Tallman Center at 11 p.m. You're going to have to swipe your card to get into the first exterior door. You're going to have to swipe your card to get into the second exterior door. Then you're going to have to show your ID to the campus safety officer working at the front desk. And then to access an elevator, you would need to swipe your ID card to access that elevator. So we've got a lot of access controls on campus to make sure that people are only getting where they're supposed to get to on campus, and that people outside of the CCS community don't have access to our buildings. We also have 30 blue light emergency call stations located on the exterior of the campuses, both at the Ford and Taubman campuses. These are a yellow phone stand, basically, with a large blue light at the top and a big red button to push to call the campus safety office over speakerphone. And then we often get a lot of questions about parking. We do have parking at both the Ford campus and the Taubman Center. It is secure and gate controlled. So again, students would have to swipe into those parking structures. They are, many of our closed circuit cameras are located in the parking structures, and those parking structures are monitored 24 hours a day. Parking, there is no additional cost for parking during normal building hours. If you are a resident, you also have access to park 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And if you are signed into a facility on campus after normal building hours, your car is able to be parked on our campus until you are signed out for the end of the day. I think those are the high points. To receive a parking pass during the first roughly 3 weeks of the semester, we give a bit of a grace period there. Your student would take their vehicle registration to the campus safety office. They would verify that your student is currently enrolled, take a copy of that vehicle registration, and issue a parking pass for the student. And it would be good for the entirety of the academic year. Okay, that brings me to the end of the content at the moment. So reminder, we are here to help you and your student navigate, the next year, potentially the next 4 years, if there's other things that come up during the entire time your student is at CCS. We're here to help. We're happy to help. I've left my contact information here on this screen, and I will ask Ryan at this point if we have any questions that are outstanding that we need to address.